Hey, what's up, guys? Appreciate you joining. Happy Friday. Bit of a crazy week in the DeFi and crypto space in general between, Ethereum and EIP 1559 and then the whole US regulation thing, which we'll touch on kind of briefly at the end as we had a few questions about that. So definitely been a wild week, but I guess price action's been pretty good, so that's at least one positive thing. And 1559 actually went through, which is another another good thing. So definitely some positive takeaways from this week through it all. Um, so with that, let's get it rolling. Thank you again for joining us and being right here, nice and early on time. With that, I'm kick it over to AE, who will kind of kick us off with a little hello.
Hey guys, happy Friday. Thanks for tuning in again. And we got Wally here with us as well.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. MM.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Happy Friday.
And Bobby was dealing with some medical issues today, so he's not able to join, but he should be back in motion real soon. But kind of with that, let's kind of get it rolling to the topic of the week. I thought it was a pretty important topic, and this was actually something that AE sort of suggested that we cover, and I thought it was a great idea because we've had a lot of things going on in terms of governance in DeFi lately. Some really good, some really not so good, maybe infamously bad in some senses. So wanted to just kind of give you guys some successful examples and highlight some successful examples of governance. Maybe some kind of common pitfalls and concerns and places where things maybe haven't gone as well. And then sort of the role of yAxis governance, both today and kind of in the long term. And then also a little bit of guidance on, how to kind of contribute productively to yAxis governance in its current form. So kind of with that, we'll kick it off with sort of a look around the DeFi landscape with some kind of recent positive outcomes from governance. So you saw or like Olympus DAO collaborating with Frax to kind of mutually increase the liquidity and demand for their sort of respective products and making a nice partnership there. Then you also had Badger recently announced, it was about a month and a half ago, that they're going to claim and stake their CVX and CVX CRV rather than selling them to compound into their new vaults that they're farming. They're using Convex to farm. So I thought that was an interesting approach and kind of going with a bit of a partnership approach there. And it's something that we sort of had mentioned before in both the Treasury diversification episode and then also on the forum discussion that came up there as well. If we were to kind of farm Convex, then potentially looking for a little bit more of a mutually beneficial relationship as opposed to just kind of dumping their reward token. So that was interesting to see an example of somebody within yAxis market vertical actually looking to kind of extend a bit of an olive branch there. And then another one from Olympus DAO, OHM, which is they voted to deploy their treasury funds, some of their treasury funds kind of into Convex and also maintain a CVX position. So again, kind of looking to, kind of create mutually beneficial relationships. So, and actually forming maybe some sort of meta governance there with that CVX position, which we kind of touched on previously in previous episodes about, accumulating governance token of other major protocols that the project is using and, using that to kind of the user's advantage and yAxis advantage as well. So interesting stuff on there. Kind of on the other hand, we had some recent controversies, namely the sushi raise, where it's kind of people could look at that in different ways, but one of the main concerns, I guess, and controversies was basically people saying that the VCs were attempting to kind of give themselves a 30% discount through the raise. So we had that, and then we also had Uniswap's education fund debacle as well. So definitely some things that maybe were a little bit lackluster implementations of governance. So want to kind of take a bit to dive into some of the kind of design processes and experimentation across DeFi and sort of the different governance models and maybe the common things that have gone well and common approaches that have gone well, and then some of the trade-offs that sort of associate with that, and how that can maybe better educate kind of our community, also educated us when we were kind of putting this topic together this week, and then hopefully help inform yAxis governance in the long term, because obviously none of this stuff is set in stone. I mean, we're always looking to kind of iterate and improve, and I think if you learn from other implementations, and it's such a fast moving space in DeFi, so learning from other implementations and other projects is definitely the way to go. So with that, we'll kind of do a quick overview of some of the unique models of governance. So, obviously the standard one is like the direct voting model, which is basically you have a proposal, you have a review period, you have a voting period, where it's usually some type of like quorum, and then it's basically one token equals one vote, and then there's a time lock deployment of the change. That's pretty standard. There's also representative democracy approach, which Synthetics is pretty famous for with their Spartan Council, which has 8 members that are voted in by token holders that vote on different proposals and issues. So it's not all the token holders voting directly all the time. It's they're basically electing kind of representatives to do so on their behalf. And then also another form, which is kind of a unique model that was recently put out by KeeperDAO, is consensus governance. It's not a unique model in terms of it's been used in the real world, but it's sort of unique in its application to DeFi, is consensus governance, which is based on opposition. So you sort of judge whether to proceed based on the amount of no votes rather than voting for or against. So it's just kind of like if there's rough consensus, then it just proceeds, as opposed to basically voting for or against, which the people that vote against basically can kind of you kind of use that as like leverage. They call it like the fear of them exiting and like leaving the project and leaving the protocol, whereas like you always look for consensus before you kind of move forward. So it's kind of a little bit of a different approach that we'll see how that kind of works out. And like I said, it's sort of you want to learn from everyone's implementation and all the experimentation in the space to inform yAxis kind of future path. And that's why it's so great having such an engaged community and having everyone just sort of bring different ideas, because everyone's going to see different things across the space and bring these ideas together that we can all look to learn and implement from. And then so some common sort of strategies and threads throughout protocols that have kind of successfully decentralized is that they start rather centralized and they sort of gradually give power to the community and to token holders. So starting with like the founders and the core people that sort of really develop the vision, and they sort of get that to a certain point and then gradually kind of give power to the community to sort of ensure some sort of resiliency and longevity and nimbleness that will allow the project to remain kind of flexible on the long term. Most changes that happen through governance usually start with like a discussion in a forum-like environment that's pretty standard across the space, and then from there you move to community approval based on like in that discussion if the community does approve, and then from there you kind of go to a formal forum proposal. And then there's some method to determine consensus. We kind of just went over 3: the direct voting, the representative democracy, and then the consensus governance. So there's some sort of method to determine consensus. And then from there, there's some sort of execution mechanism. And oftentimes there's usually a time lock before changes, or some advance notice kind of before changes are implemented. And then usually as well, this is kind of a little bit of a newer component, but it's gained a lot of traction is incentivizing quality contributions from kind of committed, usually voluntary community members that people just want to they want to contribute, but making sure that you incentivize that and you incentivize quality. So given, kind of going over some of the things that have worked well in common path, also want to look at some trade-offs and things that sort of decentralization comes with that basically, that creates some good outcomes and also some things that you have to juggle and kind of manage. So there obviously are trade-offs anytime you make a decision. So, the more decentralized something is and the more, the DAO is governing things, it basically makes things slower. It kind of mucks things up. Obviously, more centralized something is, the quicker and easier it is to make decisions and kind of move forward. But then you also, the more decentralized something is, you gain more security. So it's more anti-fragile, it's more reliable, has more longevity. There are more people that are bought into something's success. So it has a higher chance of continuing to succeed over the long term and persist. And kind of like how and when to make the shift toward more decentralization. Like I mentioned before, usually projects that have done it successfully have started centralized and then gradually decentralized over time. So kind of like how and when to make that shift is a really key thing for a lot of projects to kind of wrestle with. Some guidance from Compound recently, and also too, I will link some of the stuff from KeeperDAO as they, like I mentioned, they had kind of an innovative new model, and then I'll also link some stuff from Synthetics and Compound as well. So talking about like how and when to make that shift toward a more decentralized approach. So Compound talked about how they really wanted to make sure that the project was in a stable state with like few technical risks. And they talked about this in Chainlink SmartCon, by the way, with few technical risks that need to be addressed immediately before kind of handing over to the community. So they wanted to like generate that Lindy and generate like a sense of stability so that the community wouldn't have to take something over and then, deal with something immediate and drastic and that required attention right away. So really setting a strong foundation. And they actually waited a year from their last major code changes before kind of handing that over. So it's kind of a multi-year process to sort of decentralize. And so obviously you think about yAxis like being less than a year old. It's definitely a major goal, and it's just going to be all the development work is going to sort of push yAxis in that direction. But it's just going to take time. It's not going to happen all overnight. And I think one thing that Synthetics kind of wrestled with and how and when to make this shift is they continuously kind of experimented with giving power and then having it maybe not go so well and then having to take some back and then giving more and then kind of progressively going from there. So you want to make sure that the time is right. And Kane's talked about that over and over at Synthetics. So like I said, I'll link some materials on this after if you care to learn more. But with that, we'll kind of move a little bit more into the role of yAxis's governance. And so kind of looking at today, so we have obviously the weighted voted formula, which kind of helps mitigate the impact of one individual actor. And then also yAxis's governance kind of played a key role previously to get us to today's state with YIP9, which basically allocated the funding and emission schedule for the future of the project. And one of which is the Champions Program Bounty Board, which allows the incentivization of community contribution and kind of decentralizing that contribution, decentralizing the contributor base, which is, like I said, something that's been successful kind of elsewhere. And then also the community obviously has a role in voting on strategies and major project changes, and forum suggestions and discussion, such as the recent Era 2 emissions. So these are things obviously that community can participate in today and contribute to today. So obviously pretty significant role. And then sort of the mid to long term is you have gauges coming up with V3 where stakers are able to direct emissions to their desired vaults. So having a bit of say in that will kind of add more utility to the token. And then kind of in addition to governing major changes, eventually in the sort of mid to long term, governing the allocation of funds by keepers. So, integrating Chainlink's keepers such that the allocation of funds is fully automated, kind of using parameters set by yAxis governance. So that includes like strategy caps, performance fee, stuff like that. And so you kind of reach this state of DAO-directed fund management with on-chain voting that's enabled by this automation. So the automation using Chainlink's keepers is basically the thing that unlocks that decentralization. And then also kind of in the mid long term as well is approving new asset support and then in dictating an insurance event. That's some other roles for governance to play. And so kind of piggybacking on that is, how can the community kind of contribute to yAxis governance today? Honestly, it's like, it sounds cliche and simple, but one of the most important things you can possibly do is just being involved with the space and staying up on recent developments in DeFi, so that you can kind of make well-informed suggestions that help yAxis stay nimble and flexible as a project. Like I said, everyone's always experimenting in this space. It's so fast moving and it's hard for any one person to keep up on it. So kind of have the knowledge and the bandwidth of the collective is always going to be, more than one individual person can possibly keep up on. So that's obviously huge in looking around the space and looking at what works and seeing how we can maybe implement sort of our own iteration here, in addition to just, any ideas and suggestions that kind of come to mind. So, that kind of leads us into the idea that you can obviously post forum discussion posts with suggestions or add to other discussions, such as, the Era 2 emissions one that just happened. And then, if you're staying up on the space as well, staying up in the DeFi space, you might find new strategies, come across things like that, where you might want to make a discussion post about a new strategy. And also, too, another thing is you can help foster partnerships with other communities and other projects by making governance discussion posts in their governance forums about partnering with yAxis, using their upcoming V3 launch as maybe part of their product suite, or probably more likely maybe depositing some of their treasury. So these are different things that you can kind of do to contribute to yAxis governance today. So with that, I think we'll kind of move it on. Like I said, I will link a few things from KeeperDAO, Synthetics, and Compound about some of their implementations, which I found pretty interesting, and kind of touching on all the different models that one could possibly implement that have all been, well, two, Compound and Synthetics, have been fairly successful, and then KeeperDAO is like one to kind of keep an eye on with their sort of unique, innovative approach and see if there's anything we can learn from there. And then also one last thing that I kind of forgot to touch on would be a key trade-off with decentralization is that you can have an issue with the management of core contributors. Kane over at Synthetics has talked about this pretty extensively, where you probably still need some sort of leadership within to help with facilitating coordination among core contributors, but basically making their power over the whole protocol kind of limited, but just as somebody to kind of go to and just allocate things and resolve conflicts and other things like that. I think that's something that is sort of not able to be managed on a high frequency basis by the community. So there are these certain components that are tough, and you sort of need some sort of a leadership structure, but most obviously can be decentralized. And I think yAxis's future state of DAO directed management is just super built for the long term. It's super resilient, and it would just allow the project to stay flexible and nimble, even if it's multiple iterations of people being involved and different people being involved. Like it will continue to live on and live its life in a very time tested resilient way. So that being said, we'll kind of move into some of the questions we got ahead of time. Again, appreciate all of you guys taking the time to ask these great questions. So I will lead it off with the TISC's question, which is, to what degree can a DAO functionally be decentralized? Like, does true decentralization imply a total autonomy, or will that not be possible? Because there's always a level of development that's necessary to keep a system effectively running. Yeah, I think we covered most of this today, and trying to decentralize as much as possible, including like the power structure and fund management. But like we still need, some sort of leadership within just coordinating the actual development. Because like, let's say the community approves a new strategy. Well, that strategy needs to be written and implemented. So, obviously the DAO can dictate the direction of things and changes that are made to fund management. But at the end of the day, somebody needs to actually go in and implement it. And also, I love the the great question this week about what's the best DAO like food joint, like self-serve to some degree. Korean barbecue, Poo Hot, I'm not sure what that is, Froyo, etc. For me, it's got to be like make your own burritos. That's got to be the best DAO like food joint. But I don't know if Wally, AE, Mr. if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love food questions. So props on the food question campaign from the TISC. There's this place called The Creator, or there used to be a place called Creator before COVID, and it was an autonomous burger joint. So like you would go in and you put your selection onto this touchpad, and literally robots, just like conveyor belts and robots, they just make your burger. But there's always kind of that need for a human element to be prepping the ingredients, loading up the machine with the ingredients, things like that. So I thought that was like a kind of a good analogy for kind of where the DAO, what DAOs look like today.
Oh, that's a really nice one, Mister. It sounds really interesting. For me, it's just anything that's all you can eat. I don't really care as long as it's cheap. I'll take it.
Well, you have any thoughts there?
I agree with AE, no fairness. Cheap and
Thanks.
cheerful.
Fair enough. Alrighty, so kind of moving on from there. I appreciate the fact that we've become a part-time food review channel. So moving on from there, we've got Michael Brock asked a question about DAO governance. Should it be kind of only accepted when the protocol is truly decentralized? Does yAxis have any choke points that rely on a single entity for operation, such as front-end web services, etc.? And obviously generally agree, right? Like yAxis is still less than a year old, and many other successful decentralized governance models kind of took years to reach that point. So you kind of need the technical side to be in a bit more of a steady state, like V3 obviously deployed, and then some of the other major features from there to kind of be deployed. yAxis is still kind of building out its core infrastructure, and obviously rely on various personnel to kind of rely on various personnel today to kind of implement that. But obviously access is decentralized to the point where like, if something were to happen to someone that's involved with the project, like we could obviously still move forward and continue to exist. So, obviously we want to add more development contributors in the future, and decentralizing that contribution process more over time is a key component to that. And that's where a lot of the bounty board really comes into play, and some of the work the team's been doing and being in touch with strategy developers and such in that sense. So that's obviously a key part of the decentralization process. Big Poppy asked something similar to the TISC's question. What is the line for DAO authority? Kind of, is there a charter needed? So kind of, we addressed most of this in the TISC to the TISC question, and then also kind of throughout the intro part. But I think like the charter makes more sense in terms of like the parameters and functionality that the DAO is responsible for, understanding what its role is and how it needs to function in order for the project itself to function. And kind of in order to get to that point, I think you kind of need to build the infrastructure to support it first. So like for example, the automation of execution, like with Chainlink's keepers, that enables decentralized fund management. So you need the infrastructure integrated before you can enable the decentralized fund management. So there are obviously things that sort of need to be put in place. So it makes it kind of more of a little bit more of a midterm thing. And then also I saw Big Papa, you linked an example like charter template, which I think is super helpful and really appreciate you doing that. And obviously we can look at that, and it looked like a little bit long kind of at first glance, but we can definitely look at maybe a trimmed down version and think about that as we sort of formalize what the DAO is supposed to look like as that becomes more and more important as the sort of infrastructure allows it to be. I am that asked a question about the performance fee and what is the industry standard. So I'll give a few examples. So Yearn does a 20% performance fee and then a 2% management fee, which is actually kind of significant because it's not 2% of the performance, it's 2% of the total funds. Badger's new convex vaults are 30% management fee, and then Harvest, last I checked, was 30%, although that might have changed. We're looking at 20 to 25% performance fee for Era 2, kind of per the community feedback on the forum. And remember that this is of the governance token fund only, not of the total yield. Big Poppy kind of asked a series of questions that another kind of series of questions that AE answered, but he also mentioned about website translation, which is an effort that Mr. is leading. So, and it seems like some community members have asked to pitch in and help out with that. So that would be awesome. And I'll toss over to Mr. for a few comments on that.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yes. We're definitely looking at a bunch of different kinds of languages as far as localization is concerned. But using data rather than just kind of like going down a big old list of, the most spoken languages, kind of using data to see where we should prioritize our resources. But then also looking at, for example, things like some of the non-English language, the biggest influencers out there as well. Because those are kind of untapped audiences. But yeah, that's kind of our approach. And just wanted to, put a little plug out there. If anybody can help with languages like, any of the big Asian languages, like Russian, Turkish, definitely feel free to send out a DM, we'd appreciate the help.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Mr. And I realized I accidentally hopped over Misam's question about the MakerDAO founders, basically kind of turning things over to the community and sort of decentralizing Maker. And so Misam asked, is that where yAxis is headed if we make it? And yeah, that's like I said, it's sort of the logical evolution. I think they talked about dissolving the foundation, which is the same route that Compound went, I believe. Was it Compound? No, I'm sorry. It was Synthetics that dissolved their foundation. And so basically turning things over and decentralizing over time. And obviously Maker's been around for a long time. So, kind of once the infrastructure is in place to enable that kind of transition, then you really look to progressively decentralize more and more over time. So that's definitely where yAxis is headed if we make it. And like I said, the vision is, DAO directed fund management with on-chain voting. And that really is enabled by a lot of the automation features that TNC is implementing through the automated monitoring response and integrating Chainlink's keepers and some of these other components that really enable that. And then last, I would kind of touch on, so Big Poppy asked about the US infrastructure bill, and then Sushi T also asked about it as well and asked that we cover it today. So I'll do like a quick TLDR on it. Don't want to provide like too many comments because it's all kind of speculative at this stage, but there's an infrastructure bill kind of in the US where one of the funding sources they're hoping to use to fund it is kind of what they believe is under-collected crypto taxes. And so they want to improve reporting and enforcement of crypto taxes. So there's the Loomis Wyden Toomey amendment, which basically exempts wallet providers, protocols, proof of work miners, proof of stake validators from needing to collect tax information about their US users. And they really don't have the ability to collect this information, and it's not really applicable to these parties. Like, how is a network validator going to be able to collect information about the people conducting the transactions that they just confirmed? That's not that's not realistic at all. I think Sam Bankman-Fried equated that to like an internet service provider being responsible for a trade on a brokerage. Like, it's just not it's just not equivalent at all. But anyways, there's another amendment which is the cause of kind of concern, which is the Warner-Portman amendment, which has actually been backed by the White House and the president's administration, which only exempts wallet providers and proof of work miners from these disclosure requirements. And basically, protocols and proof of stake validators would need to collect tax information on all of the digital asset transfers that occur through them, which they really aren't capable of doing. And it's been proven time and time again that chain analysis is effective and sufficient in tracking tracking unpaid like tax liabilities and prosecuting crime and such. So it doesn't seem completely logical, but the good news is even if it did pass, it won't go into effect until 2023. There'll probably be fought in court and all that, but it's definitely obviously discouraging and something to keep an eye on, but we'll see how it develops. I believe there's supposed to be a vote on Saturday. So that's something to keep an eye on. So kind of from there, the TISC asked another question. So I'm going to the live questions here. We just had a couple, and we'll try to get through them quick and then sort of wrap it up. The TISC asked, how far can a DAO run as far as determining what's an effective tool for the future? Say there's a vast majority vote to change a fundamental ideal of yAxis, but Bobby and co rightfully think it's an awful mechanism for the health of the vision. Who gets a final say? Right now, it's obviously a majority with kind of a quorum approach, and it's at the end of the day, like, if as you decentralize, you leave things up to the community, and that's why it's really important for the community to kind of be well educated and really thinking about the future of the project when sort of making decisions. But if it's malicious, for example, then there's certain things that TNC is kind of putting in place, like the halt flag, for example, if there's any sort of malicious governance takeover. But at the end of the day, some of these things happen. Like I think Kane talked recently a lot about this. Kane from Synthetics, that there were some things that he just didn't agree with, and that the governance voted for anyways. And these things are going to happen. So we'll see kind of where it all goes, but it might be possibly a feather in the cap of the Keeper DAO model. We're focusing on ensuring kind of rough consensus and no major dissent as being the barometer rather than just simple majority. So obviously something to consider and think about over time. I'll just skip down to Benjamin's question really quick, and we'll wrap it up there. Is what makes you think V3 will drive TVL outside of dumping dumping the yAxis token on it? Any ideas as to projected APYs? So we've kind of we've talked a little bit about this in some previous weeks. It's the yield is going to be driven by the strategies that are deployed, and obviously, like I mentioned, we can refer to previous weeks, not only the episode, but I believe I also put it in the weekly X about progress on strategy developers and the movement that we've had there, and obviously the plan to focus on convex strategies. So obviously, if your convex, for example, doesn't auto compound and they offer really competitive yields, so if you just provide auto compounding as a service with lower performance fee than your competition, then you're obviously going to draw that TVL, and then even on top, being able to add some yAxis rewards on top is huge. And then the gauges adding additional token utility and value accrual to the token, which makes users want to hold and stake the yAxis token. So kind of have a lot of forces going together that will allow the project to draw a lot of TVL. And if you even look at like what Yearn has for TVL and some of the yields that they're offering, and how pretty easily it would be for yAxis to kind of beat that, I think is pretty encouraging. So obviously a specific number, like it's driven by market conditions, it's driven by the price of the governance tokens, it's driven by a bunch of different things, and obviously the strategy is deployed, but obviously plans to have great strategies after the rollout of V3. Want to make sure everything's safe, secure, deployment went well, and then look to integrate strategies from there. All right, so I think with that, probably just sort of leave it there for now. Gone a little over time, and Benjamin, feel free to toss more things in general. And I can respond to you more in there, but we'll leave it from there. Appreciate everybody joining this week and all of the great questions that we had. Thank you again, and we'll see y'all next week. Enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your weekend, and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend. See you next week. Bye.